Hello student, I hope you are doing fine. This is the last lecture of this course for spring to 2020 semester, and in this lecture we are going to discuss about the analog to digital conversion process in detail. In this lecture we will be discussing about the sampling of continuous time signals, and then quantization, and then coding. As you all know, all the signals that exist naturally are analog signals. They come from sensors, transducers, or by any other means. Like our speech signal, acoustic signal, they are all analog in form. In order to process them on a digital computer, we must digitize them using analog to digital converter. The first step that you do is sample the continuous time signal into the discrete intervals. So x of at is a continuous time signal, for example, then it would be converted into the sampled version and would be represented as x of n. So t is the independent variable in continuous time signals, and n is the independent variable in discrete time signal. T can have any value, however n is always integer. That is the condition that differentiates discrete time signal from continuous time signal. Once the signal is sampled, then it is quantized. It means the discrete time signal still have continuous amplitude. That continuous amplitude is now converted into the discrete amplitude using quantizer, and then each discrete amplitude is assigned a different code using a coder, and in that way you can convert continuous time signal into discrete signal using this three-step process. Now we are going to discuss each step individually. The first one, the sampling, is very complicated process, and we have to choose the sampling rate and the sampling interval very wisely, otherwise we are going to miss the information. So we will spend more time on sampling and quantization, and coding is simply assigning a digital code. The continuous time signals are converted into discrete time by taking samples of continuous time signal at discrete intervals of time. If x of at is the continuous time signal and it is applied at the input of the sampler, then output of the sampler would be a discrete version, which is xa of n. This is how the discrete signal is represented in most of the textbooks, and this you already know is the continuous time signal, where t here is the sampling interval. It defines how far the samples are spaced from each other. Obviously, if the samples are closer to each other, the reconstruction of the signal would be much easier and accurate. For example, this is a continuous time signal, and it is sampled at the rate 1 second. Here the t, capital T, is equal to 1 second. It means each sample is spaced 1 second apart. So you can obviously see from this figure that we cannot reconstruct sine wave accurately from this sequence. However, if we decrease the sample space or decrease the sampling interval, for example here, now we have 10 samples in 1 second, and you can see now it's very easy to reconstruct the sine wave from these samples, and if we increase it further, you can see it accurately looks like a sine wave. There are many ways to convert continuous time signal or the analog signal into the discrete time signal. For example, using uniform sampling, which is also called periodic sampling, or non-uniform sampling. The uniform sampling is mostly used in practices, and it is described by this relationship. You can see xa of n, which is the discrete time version of the continuous time signal, is equal to xa n into t, where this t is the sampling interval and it is constant in uniform sampling throughout the time interval. In non-uniform sampling, however, t may vary. For example, from minus infinity to 0, t is something else, and from 0 to infinity, t is something else. But in uniform and periodic sampling, the t, the sampling interval, is constant from minus infinity to infinity. Now we can think of a sampler as an ideal switch which turns on momentarily after each t seconds. When a continuous time signal or the analog signal is applied at the input of the sampler, then this sampled sequence is produced. Each sample is spaced t seconds apart. The reciprocal of t is in periodic sampling. There exists a linear relationship between the time variables of the continuous time and discrete time signals as shown in this equation, or alternatively we can represent this in this form where capital T is replaced by 1 upon Fs. Now since the time variables are linearly related, it means there would be some relationship in the frequency variables as well. So let's say the frequency variables of continuous time signal are capital F and capital omega, where capital F is the cyclic frequency and omega is the radial frequency of continuous time signal. And similarly, small f and small omega are the frequency variables of discrete time signals, where small f is the cyclic frequency and small omega is the radial frequency of discrete time signals. Now in order to establish the relationship between the discrete time and continuous time frequency variables, let us consider a continuous time sinusoidal waveform as shown in this equation 1, where A is the amplitude and capital F is the cyclic frequency of this. Now if we sample this continuous time signal using uniform sampling, then T would be replaced by NT or N upon Fs. So let us, after the substitution, we'll get this mathematical expression xa nt equal to a cos 2 pi f nt plus theta, or if we replace t by n upon fs, we will get this equation. Now let us compare equation 1 and equation 2. We'll get this relationship. Small f would be equal to capital F upon fs. So this is the relationship between the frequency of discrete time signal and frequency of continuous time signal. Same relationship can be established for radial frequency as well. Here the small f is called relative or normalized frequency. The range of frequency variables of a continuous time signal can be from minus infinity to infinity. It means f and omega can have any value from minus infinity to infinity. However, in discrete time signal, the range of omega can be from minus pi to pi. If the signals are sampled outside this range, then aliasing effect occurs. In terms of cyclic frequency, it is from minus 1 upon 2 to 1 upon 2. Therefore, the fundamental difference between the frequency variables of continuous time and discrete time signal is their range of frequencies, and we must keep in mind that the discrete time signals can have the frequency range from minus pi to pi or minus 1 upon 2 to 1 upon 2. So in periodic sampling, basically we map infinite frequency range of variables of a continuous time signal into the finite frequency variable range, which is summarized in this table. Here you can see this is the continuous time signal frequencies variables and their ranges, and on the right hand side we have discrete time signal frequency variables, their units and their frequency ranges that we discussed in the relationship between the CT and DT frequency variables is shown in following figure. The horizontal axis of this figure represents the continuous time frequency and the vertical axis represents the discrete time frequencies. As the continuous time frequency is varied from minus infinity to plus infinity, you can see the discrete time frequency is limited to pi and minus pi, or 1 upon 2 to minus 1 upon 2. When the frequency of continuous time signal is between minus f of s upon 2 to f of s upon 2. You can see the discrete time frequency variable is increasing linearly with the continuous time variable, as long as the continuous time frequencies are between minus f of s upon 2 to f of s upon 2, and outside this interval the frequencies are repeating itself, although in continuous time these frequencies are different, but in discrete time they appear to be same, they are repeating themselves. This effect is called aliasing effect. Therefore, what we do, we usually uh, limit frequencies in discrete time between pi to minus pi in order to avoid aliasing. And these corner frequencies after which the aliasing occurs are called folding frequency. In order to explain it further, let us consider two sinusoidal signals x1 and x2. x1 has the frequency 10 Hz and x2 has the frequency 50 Hz. Now let us sample both signals at 40 Hz. Obviously 40 Hz sampling rate is suitable for x1 but it's not suitable for x2, right? So we know that aliasing would occur particularly for x2 because the folding frequency here, which is equal to f of s upon 2, would be 20 Hz. So 20 Hz is the folding frequency. After 20 Hz all the frequencies would repeat itself, so this 50 Hz frequency would repeat itself. Now let us sample x1 and x2 at 40 Hz. We will get a discrete time signal cos pi by 2n and cos 5 pi by 2n. Now let us plot these signals and see what this is the continuous time signal x1 having frequency 10 Hz. This is another continuous time signal x2 having frequency 50 Hz, and these are the corresponding discrete time signals, and you can see they are exactly same, and this is what we expected from the example. So x1 and x2 are aliased at sample rate equal to 40 Hz. Mathematically we can see 5 pi by 2n can be rewritten in this form. We can rewrite cos 5 pi by 2n in this form, or simplifying it further we'll get this is cos pi by 2n, which is exactly equal to. Now let us choose different sampling frequency, say 410. So now obviously the folding frequency is 410 upon 2, which is 205, and both the frequencies, which are 10 Hz and 50 Hz, are well within the range of folding frequency. Therefore you can see there is no aliasing. Each signal is represented by its continuous time part, right? Is another similar example, and I am leaving this as a homework for you. Try to solve it, and if you have any problem you can ask me later. Now we can state the sampling theorem in a better way. The sampling theorem guarantees that analog signal can be perfectly recovered as long as the sampling rate is at least twice as large as the highest frequency component of the analog signal to be sampled. Mathematically, f of s, the sampling rate, should be greater than twice the maximum frequency component. And what happens if we do not sample the signal with sampling frequency greater than the twice of the maximum frequency? Aliasing will occur, and aliasing means high frequency signal components would be represented by low frequency signals, and you know better what aliasing is. We have discussed it. There are many types of sampling. Critical sampling, in which f of s is equal to twice the maximum frequency. This is called the Nyquist rate. This is also called Nyquist rate. Undersampling, when sampling frequency is less than the twice maximum frequency. Obviously when you undersample any continuous time signal, then the aliasing effect will occur. Oversampling is keeping the sampling frequency much greater than the twice of the maximum frequency. Let us consider this very simple example in which we are given a continuous time signal 3 cos 100 by t, and we have to determine the minimum sampling rate to avoid aliasing. And in part B, if the signal is sampled at the rate 200 Hz, what would be the discrete time signal? So solving part A first, the frequency of the continuous time signal is 50 Hz. So the minimum sampling rate required to avoid aliasing would be twice of the 50 Hz, which is 100 Hz. Now part B, if the signal is sampled at fs equal to 200 Hz, then the discrete time signal would be obtained 100 pi upon 200, which is 3 cos pi by 2n. Another similar example which I am leaving as a homework for you. Now let's move to the next example, a slightly more complicated example. In this example, we have an analog signal which consists of three different frequency components. This one having frequency 25 Hz, this component has a frequency 150 Hz, and this has the frequency component 50 Hz. What is the Nyquist rate for this signal? Obviously the Nyquist rate is determined from the highest frequency component of the signal. This signal has three different frequency components: f1 25 Hz for this component, f2 150 Hz for this component, and f3 50 Hz for this component. So highest frequency component f max is 150 Hz. Therefore the Nyquist rate would be determined from the maximum frequency, which is twice the maximum frequency, and it is the discrete time signal obtained by sampling at Nyquist rate is this one. And simplifying it further, you will get this equation, and in this equation you can see this component is sampled at 0 crossings, and it won't appear in the discrete time version, although it is a signal of the highest frequency in the analog version, but in discrete version it would be 0. In order to avoid this, another similar example in which we have three frequency components, we have to determine what is the Nyquist of the signal. In part B, assume now that we sample this signal using sample rate 5000 samples per second. What would be the discrete time signal obtained, and what is the analog signal that can be reconstructed with the samples if we use idea interpolation? So this is example also. I'm leaving this as a homework for you. It is exactly same as the previous example. In sampling, we basically converted the continuous time signal into the discrete time signal, but as far as the amplitude of the discrete time signal is concerned, it is still continuous. It has many values, or we can say it has still infinite values. So in order to convert the signal into digital form, we have to limit infinite values into the finite number. The process of converting the discrete time continuous amplitude signal into a signal which has finite or discrete amplitudes is called quantization. Obviously, when you convert infinite number of values to finite number of values, you are going to lose some part of the signal. That is called quantization error, or sometimes it is referred as quantization noise. And obviously, ideally it should be 0, but it is not possible to have 0 quantization noise until unless you have same signal at the input of the quantizer and output of the quantizer. And therefore we are going to discuss how we can actually minimize the quantization noise. Now let us consider these two figures, one with a 2-bit resolution and another with a 3-bit resolution, and we can say this is a 2-bit quantizer and this one is a 3-bit quantizer. In 2-bit quantizer we have 4 different levels, and in 3-bit quantizer we have 2 power 3 levels. It means 8 different levels. So same sine wave in 2-bit quantizer has 4 levels only, and same sinusoidal waveform in 3-bit quantizer have 8 different levels. So obviously Increasing the number of quantization levels is increasing the accuracy of quantization, or in other words, the quantization noise or the quantization error is reducing if you are increasing the number of quantization levels. Let us consider this figure in which a sine wave is represented by 4-bit quantizer. It means it have 16 discrete levels. And now if in the amplitude of the continuous signal falls between two discrete levels, for example level 14 and 15, in between level 14 and 15 we have so many different amplitudes. Now what happens to these amplitudes? There are two methods for this. One method is rounding off method. It means the value between 14 and 15 would be rounded up, and other method is the truncation method, in which the values between 14 and 15 after the decimal point would be truncated simply. For example, 14.1, 14.2, 14.3 would be represented by 14, up to 14.9 even would be represented by 14. And in rounding up, the number between 14 and 15 are rounded up and are represented by nearest quantization level. For example, 14.1, 14.2 would be rounded off to 14 and would be represented by this level. However, the values equal to 14.5 or greater than 14.5 would be represented by this level. So obviously the rounding off method is more accurate comparatively, but slightly more complicated algorithm as compared to the truncation method. Now the quantization operation on the sample x of n is mathematically denoted as xq of n equal to q represents the quantization operation on x of n, which is the discrete time and continuous amplitude signal, right? So the signal which was obtained in step 1, x of n, and after quantization you will get xq of n signal. So xq of n is the discrete time as well as the discrete amplitude signal. Then the quantization error is basically a sequence EQ of n represented by EQ of n, defined as the difference between the quantization value and the actual sampled value. So the error of the quantization can be represented mathematically as q of n minus x of n. This is called quantization error or quantization. Now in order to explain it in detail, let us consider this example. In this example we have a discrete time signal x of n, which is equal to 0.9 power n when n is greater than or equal to 0 and it is 0 elsewhere. This signal is obtained by sampling a continuous time signal xa of t, which is equal to 0.9 power t for t greater than or equal to 0, and this is how it is graphically represented. This is the bold line is the continuous time version, which is xa of t, and these are the samples obtained after discretizing the continuous time signal. So now how many samples do we have? We have 9 different samples. So the sampling interval is 1 second. Right? Now in order to illustrate the operation of quantizer using truncation and rounding method, let us consider the data in the following table. In this table we have varied n from 0 to 9 and we have calculated the value of x of n for each value of n, this one. Now in this column the corresponding value of quantizer is calculated using truncation method, and in this column the quantization value is calculated using rounding method, and in these columns we have corresponding errors. This one the quantization error due to truncation, and this is the quantization error due to rounding. Now you can see in as long as the level of the x of n is on same as the quantization level exactly, for example 1, then error would be 0. Quantization error would be generated when the value of x of n would not be exactly equal to the discrete levels which are assigned to quantizer. For example, the quantizer levels are 1, 0 0.9, 0 0.8, 0 0.7, 0 0.6, 0 0.5, 0 0.4, 0 0.3, 0 0.2, 0 0.1 onwards. So when the value is 0.81, which is between 0.9 and 0.7, then in truncation method this 1 would be discarded, and in rounding up obviously 1 would be discarded. So there is no difference in truncation and rounding up method as far as this sample is concerned. And here 0.729 will be represented by 0.7 in truncation, and rounding is also same. Therefore the error in truncation, uh, here it is 0.029, and however it is minus 0.0, and here for example when n is equal to 4, the value of x of n is 0.65, and obviously in truncation we will discard these values, but in rounding up we will be representing this with 0.7. So you can see here now the error due to truncation is greater than the error due to rounding off. Here as well the error due to truncation is uh, very large, almost 10 times, and here it is smaller. So in other samples also you can observe the similar pattern. So you can conclude that the rounding method gives you smaller error because it assigns the nearest value of the quantization level. However, the truncation simply discards the value and it doesn't assign the nearest value. Therefore, the same thing that we discussed in the last slide is explained graphically here. We have three figures. In this figure we have plotted the analog signal and corresponding sampled values. In this figure we have plotted the analog signal and corresponding sampled values after performing truncation, and in this figure we have plotted analog signal and corresponding sample values after performing rounding. Now the truncation quantizer always assigns the quantization level below it. For example, whenever the amplitude of the continuous time signal falls between two quantization levels, for example this one, this amplitude is between 0.7 and 0.6, the truncation quantizer has assigned the value below it. Similarly here and here, here and here as well, and here as well. On the other hand, the rounding quantizer assigns the value which is nearest. For example, here the nearest value is 0.7, but the truncation quantizer has still assigned 0.6 value, but the rounding quantizer is assigned 0.7 value, and likewise in other samples as well. And because of this, you can see the error in quantization is comparatively smaller as compared to this truncation quantizer. This smaller division is called. Now the maximum instantaneous quantization error in rounding is limited to the range minus delta upon 2 to delta upon 2. And can you guess what would be the maximum instantaneous error when rounding quantizer is used? Quantization step can be calculated as delta equal to x maximum value minus x minimum value and L minus 1, where x maximum and x minimum is the dynamic range of the signal. For example, you are using a sine wave of amplitude 3, then 3 to minus 3 would be the dynamic range of the sine wave, and L is the number of quantization levels. How many quantization levels are there? There are 16 levels, then L will be 16. For example, the one example that we are using, if we want to calculate the delta x maximum minus x minimum L minus 1. So maximum value of x here is 1 and minimum value of x here is 0. And how many quantization levels are there? 1 2 3 4 5 6 7 8 9 10 11. 11 quantization levels. So 1 upon 10 is 0.1. So the quantization step in this particular example is 0.1. Now here is an example in which the effect of quantization noise is shown. We have 6 different images, and you can see given two quantization levels were used, the image is not quite clear. However, when the levels of the quantization are increased, you can see the image is getting better. That image is getting better because the quantization noise is reducing, and you know, the quantization error or the quantization noise depends upon the quantization step delta, right? And the smaller the delta would be, smaller would be the error. Now the final step in digitizing this continuous time signal is the coding. In coding, each quantization level is assigned a binary code. For example, in this figure we have 16 discrete level, and each discrete level is assigned a different binary code. If we have 16 discrete levels, you need 4-digit binary code to represent 16 levels. If we have 8 discrete levels, you need 3-digit binary code, and likewise. For each discrete level, assign a binary code, and this after assigning the code, the signal would be converted into digital pulses. Let us solve this example in which we are given a discrete time signal, and which is quantized with the resolution of 0.1. How many bits are required in the ADC? We have to find out the number of levels of the ADC and the number of bits of the ADC. Also, what would be the maximum instantaneous quantization error if the rounding quantizer is used? Now, in order to find out the bits in the ADC, we need to find out how many levels are required, means L. So we have this formula, delta equal to x maximum minus x minimum divided by L minus 1. We already know the value of delta, and x maximum minus x minimum can be determined from this expression. We know it is a sinusoidal signal, and 6.35 represents the maximum value, the peak value of the signal, and the minimum value would be minus 6.35. So substituting these values in this equation, you can find out the value of L. So 128 discrete levels are required if you want to represent each step by 0.1. Now, how many bits are required? That can be determined by computing the power of 2, which is 2 power 7. So 7-bit ADC converter is required. Now let us find out the quantization error. Now the quantization error can be calculated using this formula, and we know what's the value of delta, which is 0.1. So the quantization error is between minus 0.05 to 0.05. Obviously, we can further reduce this quantization error by increasing quantization levels. It means decreasing the value of delta. If we use smaller delta, we will be using more quantization levels. And here is a similar example, and I am leaving this as homework for you. In this example, we have a smaller quantization step, which is 0.02, and you have to calculate how many bits are required in the ADC, and also determine the maximum instantaneous quantization error if truncation quantizer is used. There are other two simple examples. We have already solved similar examples in this lecture and in previous lectures. Give it a try, and if you find any difficulty, you can always contact me on my email address. And that is the end of this lecture. If you have any questions and queries, you can contact me using the email address given on the first page. Thank you very much.